Welcome to the tutorial for lesson number 6 of Celtic Christianity Online. This week we'll be taking a look at Celtic Christianity maturing in a changing world. Our period of study will be between the 7th and 12th century of the Common Era. In this time period, the treasured traditions of the founding years of Celtic Christianity as seen in lesson 4, and of the influence of monasticism as highlighted in lesson 5, were impacted by changes in society. We will be taking a look at this in 3 parts. Part 1 will take a look at the changes which happen as a result of the encounter between the Irish mission from Iona and the Roman mission from southern England, which culminate in the Synod of Whitby in 664. Part 2 will deal with another challenge, which comes in the form of Viking raids, which begin in the late 8th century. These same individuals of Scandinavian origin will eventually become an important part of the insular society itself. Finally, we will examine the waves of reform, which occur first in the 7th and 8th centuries, and then again in the 12th century, with the flexibility that characterizes the very nature of spiritual culture. So these will be the 3 parts of the tutorial today. To begin, we will define what tradition actually means. The word tradition comes from the Latin trans, or over, and dare, or to give. That is what is handed on by a religious culture from generation to generation. For Celtic Christians and for continental and Eastern Christians, tradition means the holding of a faith in God as Trinity, which is made up of God the Father and Creator, Christ the Redeemer, and the Holy Spirit, or the sanctifier of Christian life. Traditions, in the plural, refers to the particularities of many and sometimes diverse practices and celebrations of this shared Christian faith. The maturing of a spiritual tradition can be gauged by several developing characteristics. These include a disciplined creativity in expressing its most profound convictions, a flexibility in meeting the challenge of change. These first 2 characteristics then shape how the traditions are cherished, managed, and held on. An example of a maturing tradition is found in the Synod of Whitby. The Synod is a direct result of the missions from Iona and southern England. The Synod of Whitby is an example of maturing tradition managing the complex diversities, the need for unity, and the challenge of change. A synod is an assembly of church delegates, gathered together to discuss and decide on church laws and practices. This particular synod was originally called by King Oswy of Northumbria and summoned in 664 at St. Hilda's Double Monastery in Streanshaw, which would be later called Whitby Abbey. Here's an early 14th century stained glass window depicting St. Hilda. The window itself is located in Christ Church Cathedral in Oxford. Note here that she is shown as a princess wearing a crown. Earlier, in 657, Hilda established her double monastery, which consisted of both men and women, on the specific instructions of King Oswy of Northumbria. There were various issues discussed at the synod itself. The synod was called to decide on unity of practice among Christians and on several specific questions. A question of primary importance was the questioning of the dating of Easter. As a diversity of calendars and date calculations existed in the early church, it could mean that there was a discrepancy in the dates for celebrating the central liturgical feasts of the Christian year. In the Isles, such a discrepancy existed between the practices of churches following the Irish mission from Iona and of those following the Roman mission, which began in the south of England. For this reason, the process of the Synod of Whitby is often characterized as a showdown or a rumble between the Celtic and Roman Christianities, but this is simplistic at best. By the year of the Synod, a large swath of Ireland, especially in the south, was already following the Roman calendar. Likewise, churches in Britain also varied in their practices, some following the Irish calendar. The fact of the division was sharply focused in Northumbria itself, as the king's own household was divided. King Oswy followed the customs of Iona, while his second wife, who was from Kent, followed the Roman customs. This means that while King Oswy would be celebrating the feast of Easter, his wife would still be in the 40-day period leading up to Easter, which is characterized by fasting and prayer. Needless to say, this would be slightly awkward. These two different perspectives were represented at the synod by Abbot Colman of Lindisfarne, who wanted to honor the tradition of St. Columba of Iona and of the monk Wilfrid, who would travel to Rome in hopes that the Isles could become unified in practice with continental Christians. From the accounts of the Venerable Bede, passionate debates were given. King Oswy finally pronounced in favor of the Roman customs over those of Iona. The deciding factor, as reported by Bede, was that Rome represented the authority of St. Peter, who took precedence over the authority of St. Columba of Iona. Even though the latter was recognized as a worthy and holy man, and as the founder of various monasteries and missions, the importance of St. Peter as the first pope trumps this. Note again the key locations for Christianity in the Isles at this period. There is Iona, Columba's foundation and source of Celtic mission in northern Britain. In the south, Canterbury, the center of the Roman mission to Britain. Located a little bit farther north, Whitby, the location of the synod. And a little farther north still, Lindisfarne, the monastery founded by Aidan of Iona and later guided by Colman, who supported the customs of Iona. Also to the west, Mayo Abbey, who was founded by Colman before the Synod of Whitby, and Inishbofin, a monastery founded by Colman after the Synod of Whitby. An instrumental figure in uniting the Christianity of the Isles with that of the continent is St. Cuthbert. Prior to the Synod of Whitby, Cuthbert had already experienced both the continental and the form of Christianity found in the Isles. After the Synod, he accepted the decision for Roman customs and helped to implement them at Lindisfarne. This makes Cuthbert a figure that transcends and reconciles different groups. In Lesson 5 it was suggested that St. Cuthbert acts as another type of Patrick, in that he is capable of working within the liminal space between the continuity and discontinuity of the recent past. Here it is suggested again that he embodies this hybrid spirit of insular Christian culture. This ends part 1. Join me for part 2, where we will be examining the Vikings. The link is in the description below. I'll see you in just a moment.